On this week's episode of the podcast, negotiate better with the right approach.
Welcome to the Crushing Debt Podcast with your host, Florida attorney Sean Yesner, where our goal is to help you get rid of the financial bullies in your life.
So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. My name is Sean Yesner, owner and founder of Yesner Law. And so this week is going to be a solo podcast by me. I do not have a guest on this week's episode, but as I do at the beginning of most of my episodes, I do want to give a little bit of love to our sponsor, Sam Cohen at Attorneys First Insurance. And so for those of you who don't know, Sam and Attorneys First Insurance provide errors and omissions insurance, also called E&O insurance, also called malpractice insurance, to attorneys and title companies. What I love about Sam is that he'll compare, quotes, apples to apples. And so a lot of times when attorneys or title companies are picking out different types of malpractice coverage, there's a grid and a chart and all kinds of different craziness, but Sam will break it down into easy to understand terms so that you can compare apples to apples. What do you have versus what is he offering, and is his product better, worse, or the same? And the other thing I like about Sam is that he's honest, and so if his product won't save you any money, he'll tell you that. So if you're an attorney or a title company, whether inside the state of Florida or outside the state of Florida, contact Sam at attorneysfirst.com, or go to his website, www.attorneysfirst.com. If he can't quote your coverage in the state where you live, he can send you to an insurance person in that state and get you insurance coverage. So again, www.attorneysfirst.com. So as most of you know, most of you that have been longtime listeners, my community holds a semi-annual garage sale. Twice a year, they hold a garage sale. Now, the October one I'll always remember because that's right around the birth of my oldest son. In fact, there's a story there. I heard, that going for a walk might induce labor. And so at our very first garage sale back in 2011, when we first moved into the community, we knew that the garage sale was very close to the baby's due date, to my oldest son's due date. And so I told my wife, why don't you walk to the end of the block and see what things they have for sale in the garage sale? Come walking back. That was on a Saturday. On Sunday, her water broke. Sunday night, her water broke. And on Monday, our first son was delivered. And so it worked. And so for that reason, the October garage sale is always right around the time of my older son's birthday. And so we always enjoy participating in the garage sale. The other garage sale that happens in the community happens in and around the May timeframe. So if you're listening to this episode and you live in or near the Tampa Bay area and you're interested in participating in the garage sale right around May, right around October, so right around April and right around September, let me know and I'll tell you when and where the garage sale is going to be for that year. But after I started the podcast, I realized that there were sales lessons within the garage sales because garage sales are low stress environments. And so, if I offer somebody $2 to buy something that I have for sale and they say no, I've lost out on a $2 sale. It's not like I'm trying to quote them some type of, $2,000 attorney fee for something. It's a $2 sale. And if I lose out on it, I lose out on it. Or if they counter me at $1.50 or $1, well, maybe it's worth that $1 or $1.50 not to have to put that thing away again. So I find that garage sales are very, very low impact places to practice your sales skills. One thing I want to know, one thing I would love for you all to feedback to me is where else can you all practice your sales skills and your negotiation skills? I always find garage sales are easiest, but I know it's not the only place. So let me know. Feedback to me. Let me know either by email or by comment to this show. Let me know where you all like to practice your garage sale or your negotiation and your sales techniques. So before I really jump into the meat, I do want to give you a little bit of background. So the first episode that I did regarding garage sales was episode 68, and that episode was all about negotiations. It was all about having your price point beforehand. It was all about being willing to walk away versus, taking less to avoid putting the thing back in the garage. And so episode 68 was all about negotiations. The next episode I did was 86, and 86 was all about presentation. And so the presentation of the items for sale went a long way towards increasing their price when I was negotiating for price and selling things. And so the way that I analogize these two episodes to negotiations is when you are negotiating, you need to be prepared. You need to have your price points set up. You need to have what you want to accomplish in your mind already. You want to know where you're willing to walk away and where you're willing to take a little less to get the deal done. That was episode 68. And then episode 86, how are you presenting your case to the creditors? Are you presenting your case to the creditors in such a way that compels them to want to accept your offer in terms of your negotiations? And so not only are these episodes that help with sales techniques, but they're also episodes that help with negotiation techniques. The next one I did was episode 118, and 118 was all about patience. And so while you do need to have your number where you're willing to walk away, you do need to be prepared. You also need to be patient because typically negotiations and sometimes sales can take a long time. And if you're anxious and if you go back to the creditor or if you go back to the seller and, hey, what's the status? What's going on? I'm anxious to buy. Well, then they know that they have the leverage and either the settlement amount with the creditor goes up or the amount that you're going to sell or you're going to buy it for goes up. So you want to have patience. You don't want to let negotiations languish for too long, but you want to have some patience. You don't want to appear over anxious to get the deal done. You want to make sure that this is something that you can do in due time. You want to have some patience. And that was episode 118. The last one that I did, the most recent one that I did, was back in May of 2019, and it was episode 168, and it was all about preparation. And so you want to be prepared. You want to know your goals. You want to know what you want to accomplish when you're going into any negotiation, whether it's a creditor negotiation or whether it's a negotiation about sales. You want to be prepared. You want to have your numbers put together. You want to have similar sales put together. Maybe you want to walk around the community and see what other similar items are selling for around the community so you know how to price yours. Maybe you want to prepare by having stickers on the items in advance that say their price. So those are all the lessons so far. Now, admittedly, I apologize. There hasn't been a garage sale lesson episode since May of 2019, in part because the October 2019, I also coach my boys in soccer and I couldn't participate in the garage sale in October of 2019 because I was actually coaching a soccer game that day. And the May 2020 obviously was interrupted by COVID and the coronavirus. And so that's why we haven't had some intervening garage sale lesson podcast episodes. But I do have one for you today. And so, like I said, negotiate better with the right approach as the title of today's episode. And so approach, I think, is the word there. And one of the things that I did was I sat back and I looked. So this garage sale was kind of interesting because we held it even though we're still in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic. And so different from other garage sales, what I noticed this time was that cars would drive by the house, either with the windows rolled up or the windows rolled down, look at what I had out for sale, and either stop and get out and put on a mask or keep driving. It wasn't people walking the neighborhood like it normally used to be. Now, there were some people walking the neighborhood, and I think that participation in this month's garage sale was down because people are nervous about the coronavirus. And this is not a political statement of whether you should fear it, whether you should not fear it, whether you should get out, whether you should wear masks. Has nothing to do with any of that. This is purely a sales tactic and negotiation tactic podcast episode. But what I found interesting was all the things I'd talked about before: presentation, patience, preparation. All that stuff went into determining whether a car would stop and whether they would get out and take a look at what I had for sale. And so all of those things factored into it. Now, what do I mean by approach? And so I sat back and I looked and I watched and I experimented with a couple of things. So as people would drive by, I would either remain silent and watch them drive by, or as people would drive by with their windows down, I would yell out to them, "Hey, how's it going? Are you finding any good deals? How's the sale treating you today? Are you getting, much accomplished today? Are you enjoying the weather this morning?" Whatever it was to grab their attention. And what I found was in those situations where I would reach out and grab their attention, there was a much higher likelihood that they would stop and get out of the car. When I let them just drive by and look, there was a much lower percentage chance that they would stop and get out of the car and take a look at what I had to offer. And then when they approached me, I would engage them in conversation. "Hey, how you doing? How's it going?" Similar to how I would call out to them to get them to stop the car, I would also engage with them in terms of just small talk and how you doing. And in some cases, I would stop them. I would let them get out of the car and I wouldn't say anything. And again, what I noticed is in those cases where I reached out to them after they got out of the car and started some kind of dialogue or conversation with them, they had a much higher percentage of staying versus getting out of the car, looking, getting back into the car, and driving away. When I engaged them in conversation, they had a much higher percentage of stopping and looking at what I had for sale versus when I said nothing, they would basically step out, take a look, step back into the car, and drive away. So, again, what's your approach when you're dealing with negotiations, when you're dealing with creditors? What's your approach? Do you try to humanize yourself to the creditors? It's probably much harder for the creditors to be super strict in enforcement of a debt or a collection if you've humanized yourself to them. Or do you just send them emails with blank financial statements or filled out financial statements that really give no impression of who you are and what you do and why you need to negotiate? So what's your approach in your negotiations? What's your approach with creditors? Are you friendly? Are you antagonistic? Are you combative? Are you nice? Are you polite? What's your approach? And so all those different kinds of factors come into play in terms of negotiating with your creditors. But that's not it. So there was one other thing that I did, a couple other things I did actually. Before I get there, however, one of the interesting things that I analogized from the garage sale, I've been mentioning the last couple of weeks that I do have my second book out called Become Debt Free. Now, it's only available digitally, and there is a version that you can get Audible. Not Audible, the program, but the Audible version, the recorded version of the book. Now, I do plan to try to get it up on Audible, and I will try to get it up on Kindle. But for right now, the book is in a PDF format, and it's basically tips and tactics and strategies to help you increase your income or decrease your expenses, or use both of those strategies to save up the money to pay your creditors to become debt-free. Now, I've been saying for weeks, the book is available at SeanMYesner.com/become debt-free. I've been saying that for weeks, but again, what is the approach? How much have I told you about what that book can do? Did I tell you that that book is based on 20 plus years of experience of me as an attorney negotiating? Did I tell you that that book is based on real world examples with clients? Did I tell you that that book is based on real world examples that I've used myself? So even from my sales perspective, I have to look at my approach. And so what I would love for all of you to do is go to SeanMYesner.com/become debt free. M stands for Michael. SeanMYesner.com/become debt free. Pick up your free copy of my new book, Become Debt Free, in less than 1 hour, and let me know what you think. Give me an honest opinion, an honest review of what you think. Again, it's 30 plus strategies, different ways to negotiate with creditors, different ways to increase your income, different ways to decrease your expenses. And the hope is that each of these different tactics will take less than an hour to implement. And as you implement combinations of these factors, you will accelerate your ability to save money and therefore pay down your debt and ultimately become debt free. So again, it's at SeanMYesner.com/become Amazon.com/become debt free. And again, one of the lessons I learned here at the garage sale, what's been my approach in getting that book out to all of you? What's been my approach in promoting that book? What's been my approach in selling that book? And based on the lessons that I learned in this latest garage sale, my approach to getting that book into as many hands as possible is definitely going to change from here on out. So, not only are these lessons that I try to convey to you, but these are lessons that I try to put into practice myself to help me, to help my law firm. So the last thing that I noticed here is as people would get out of the car and I would engage them in conversation, the type of conversation also mattered. And so when I would just let them window shop, they had a lot less likelihood of buying. And if they did buy, it was at a lot lower average price. But when I engaged them in conversation and after getting through some niceties, basically said, how can I help? What types of things are you looking for? Are you looking for baby items? Are you looking for bachelor pad items? Are you looking for all the different things that I had for sale at the garage sale? When I would engage them in conversation and try to find out what it was that they wanted, what were their goals, my sales went up and my average sale price went up. So when you're negotiating with creditors, when you're negotiating with buyers, are you really trying to figure out what they want? Now, it's easy to say with creditors, what they want is money. And while that's true, how much money? Do they want 100% of what's owed? Do they want 90% of what's owed? 30% of what's owed? Are they willing to take the principal balance and give up the interest? Are they willing to take something and give up attorney's fees? Are they willing to take something up front and payments over time? What are their goals? And the only way you're going to find out their goals is to engage them in conversation and say, how can I help? What can I do? How can I do that? Now, one other thing that I want to mention is a book that I read on negotiation tactics. It's by a guy named Chris Voss, V as in Victor, Voss. And it's a book about negotiation strategies. It's called Never Split the Difference. It's a fantastic book. If you haven't picked it up and read it, I highly suggest that you do so. I will try to remember to put an affiliate link in the notes. And so if you want to click through my affiliate link, which gives me a few dollars if you order and buy the book, or if you just want to go to Amazon separate from me and type in Never Split the Difference, or type in the author's name, Chris Voss, V as in Victor, OSS. And so Chris was a former hostage negotiator, federal hostage negotiator. And so he takes the tips and tricks that he learned by being a hostage negotiator and talks about them in this book about negotiations. And in reading this book, it was very interesting to me how a lot of these concepts were things that I've talked about in the previous 4 episodes. Episode 68 about negotiation, episode 86 in terms of presentation, episode 118 in terms of patience, episode 168 in terms of preparation, and then this episode in terms of approach. All those different things are included in Chris's book, which is a fantastic book, and I highly recommend you all read it. You can also, get a little snippet of what those lessons are here on this podcast. And so garage sale episode number 5 seems to be coming to a close. A pretty short episode this week. I don't have a guest that I can bounce off of and expand time for you. But, again, the lessons that I learned from this month's garage sale approach. Do you make the first move, or do you sit back and wait? Do you engage them in conversation and humanize yourself, or do you just send them the bare facts? Do you ask how you can help and try to engage and determine their goals, or do you let them just basically window shop? And again, these tactics apply whether you're talking about negotiating with a creditor, or they apply whether you're talking about negotiating with a buyer or seller. Again, what's your negotiation strategy? What's your presentation strategy? Do you have patience? What's your preparation strategy? And what's your approach? And again, as we get to the May garage sale, I'll try to remember and record another episode about garage sale tactics. I'll practice some other tactic, and then as we get to October of next year, again, another tactic about garage sale tactics and what I've learned from negotiating at a garage sale. So again, I would love for you all to answer the question, where do you practice your sales skills? Where do you practice your negotiation skills? I find that garage sales are great places to do it, but I recognize there could be other low-impact places where you can practice these sales skills, these negotiation skills. And I would love to get those ideas from you and get more of those episodes from you. Again, please remember to visit our sponsor, Sam Cohen at Attorneys First Insurance, which is attorneysfirst.com. Again, let me know or go to SeanMYesner.com/become debt free if you want a free PDF copy of my newest book, Become Debt Free, in less than 1 hour. I appreciate all of you. We are coming up on 100,000 downloads lifetime for the show, and I am super excited about that, and I appreciate every single one of you listening to the show. And so, like I say at the end of every episode, I hope that at the end of the month you have more money rather than at the end of the money you have more month. That'll do it for this week's shorter episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast, and we hope you join us for next week's episode.
If you have questions that you think would make a great topic for a future episode, please email Sean or connect with us on social media. Sean Yesner and Yesner Law, PL, are Florida licensed attorneys. The information contained in this week's episode is not a substitute for legal advice. Your situation may differ, especially if you are located somewhere other than the state of Florida. If you have questions, please contact our office or contact a local attorney. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.